Hey everybody, Oak Norton here, and I am joined by Jefferson Shupe, author of the Bathwater Brigade book. This is a book that I just recently finished, and it was really, it was more than I expected. It was not only entertaining, but also very educational, and I wanted to have a conversation with Jefferson about this book and share it with you because I really think that there's some great principles in this book that can help us become better listeners and problem solvers. And so, welcome, Jefferson. Thanks for being on the broadcast with me.
Hey, Oak, thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to hold up your copy of the book so people can take a look at it?
Sure.
Bathwater Brigade. This is at what point? Let's just jump backwards a little bit. So, how long have you been kind of noodling about this kind of a story? And people don't know what the story is yet, but at what point, how long ago did you start thinking about this story?
Yeah. Good question. As we'll talk later, the story has it has a lot of teachings within the story, and I started thinking about those probably about 15 years ago. I went through sort of a personal journey that lasted about 10 years, as I learned a lot of those things the hard way by doing it wrong and sort of stumbling along, figuring it out. The story itself, well, let me just say I wrote this originally as a nonfiction book, and I wrote it for my kids because I felt like they needed what was in there. This was sort of my way to teach them in a way that would hopefully be entertaining and stick in their minds. And I wrote a nonfiction book at first, and I got done with it, and I thought, teens aren't going to read this. I don't think it's going to catch on. And so I shelved the project for a little bit, and I was reading a book for work. It was business related, and it was teaching things in a story format. And it struck me. I said, wait a second, I can write this in a young adult novel. And I kind of dabbled in, I enjoy writing, and I've written a little bit of fiction before, not a complete novel that's gone out there. And so, yeah, that's how I got started.
Oh, that's awesome. I loved the story and the progression. I'm going to have you tell like overview kind of like what the story is here in a sec, but I really loved the progression of the characters. I thought it was very well done. I mean, there was at one point I was like, okay, I mean, out of the entire book, right? I was like, I don't know that felt as realistic to me as, it might have just been to fit it into the story. But then as the story went on, that kind of faded into the background. I was like, yeah, now I'm kind of seeing the resolution of that. And I don't want to spoil any of the story, but I loved it. Written for young adults, teens, whatever. I loved it as an adult and thought that, like you said, there's some valuable lessons in it and stuff. So why don't you tell people a little about the storyline so they get familiar with what's going on?
Sure. Yeah, it takes place on a fictional Texas college campus, and there's a kid named Jace. He's a new freshman there, and he starts school, and his best friend is also there. His best friend comes from a family of law enforcement in their tradition. And recently, a year before, in that college town, there was a shooting of an unarmed black man by a police officer. And there was an uproar at the time, and it was getting to be a year later, and the police officer was on trial. And so that's what was going on. And so Jace's friend was involved in conducting operations, sort of like pranks, against this violent group that was against the police. They were just causing havoc in the town. And so he recruited Jace to help him out, and Jace was glad to. He said, yeah, he looked into the situation a little bit and thought, yeah, he was definitely on the side of the police. And so one of their operations went wrong. Somebody got hurt, and Jace ended up having to commit or having to conduct community service for a period of time. And one of the violent group members had to join him as well that was involved. Though that violent group is called Zero Supremacy in the book, or Zeros. So he's in the middle of that, and he meets a girl in one of his courses, and she challenges the professor in an interesting way. It's a science class, and the topic is for that day was global warming, climate change. And it really gets his gears turning. And so he asks her later, he says, what was that? How did you, I don't understand what happened there, but that was really cool. And how did you learn how to do that? And at first she was pretty vague with him, but eventually he earns her trust, and she introduces him to the Bathwater Brigade, which is a campus club. It's a tradition. It's been around for decades. And that is where students get together. It's sort of like a debate club, but the goal is to find all possible angles of an issue that they can, not to find a winner at that point. There's more to it we'll probably get into later, but so Jace, he starts attending those meetings. He starts learning things about, more things about himself, about his worldview, and all the while he's dealing with this zero supremacist that he's forced to work with, and also his best friend. And so he's kind of caught in the middle of things.
Yeah, well, that's a great summary. It lead into like where things start to go into the roller coaster of the ups and downs that come with anytime somebody's trying to learn something new, or we all make mistakes. We have the maybe good intentions, but then we say something that's wrong, off, whatever. And so I just love the way that the book sort of portrays, like, hey, here's a principle. Now let's watch Jace kind of struggle into this and experiment with it, and how he grows from going through these things. So it was just so well done. And
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk for a minute about the brigade meetings. So they would have this weekly meeting or whatever, and they got together, and there was usually some type of dojo training at the beginning of this meeting before they would get into like the meat of the meeting, where they're talking about a particular issue. And like you said, seeing it from all different angles, like, hey, this is fair game. Doesn't matter where you're at, just start poking holes into this issue, and let's see, where it kind of shakes out. So explain the concept of the dojo. Where did you get that from? Or how did you, start thinking about it and come up with like the 4 core dojo lessons?
Yeah, great question. I guess I can go back to that sort of 10-year journey that I had. When I was a young adult, married, I had my worldview, I had my, political vision and everything. And I was sort of stereotypical. I'd argue with people. And I didn't realize that there's a difference between winning and winning somebody over. I thought it was the same thing. And I thought, once I show that I'm right, once I refute their facts or their talking points or whatever, then of course they'll come over to my side and realize that they were wrong. And I found that didn't work. Part of it was because I didn't know everything. Sometimes I'd get into it with somebody because I was paying attention to politics. I thought this is big stuff. We need to save our country here. And so I try to do my part to get my ideology out there. And by the way, where this is going is I'm not saying to not do that. This is how to do it better, in my opinion. But I had a lot of basically the dojo lessons came from what I learned on my own. I had one experience where I was at a, a retreat, or I guess a family reunion, and there was someone there that was on the other side politically, and we got into it. And I think for a while, I hadn't been talking with a human being that was on the other side. And so I realized later that I had a lot that was bottled up, that I was, watching, consuming media, and I knew all the talking points, and I knew what they believed, and I knew how to refute that. So we got into it big time, and it was in a big group of a lot of people, most of whom probably weren't that interested in the topic, but they were forced to listen because we got in this mode where we sort of dominated the conversation, and we both needed to have the last word. And so it went for quite a while, probably like 30 minutes. And I left that feeling, well, it didn't feel as good as I thought it did. I don't even know if I won. Like, I kind of thought I won with my points, but something about it didn't feel right. So that set me on a path to try to do it better, try to be more convincing, and I guess keep friends too, because I didn't do a good job at that point. So the dojo lessons, there are 4 lessons in the book, and the purpose of those is how to talk to someone that you disagree with. And we're talking about somebody on the other side, not like a celebrity or a politician, but like a neighbor that's on the other side. And even if you guys don't get along, even if you've talked before and they, even if they hate you, the dojo is how to bring them around and how to engage with them. And there's some benefits to doing that. It's not just about being nice, or trying to be a better world citizen or something like that. There are benefits not just to them, but also to you.
What kind of benefits? Because like I know, I've been involved for 18 years in some of these issues, as you know, a little about my background, and I have pulled my hair out at times trying to deal with some of the individuals that they don't want to hear it, or they don't want to know what parents feel or think. And so it does create some very I don't want to say hard feelings. I think I always was nice in my conversations with people. Some people, maybe somebody's out there going, yeah, right, Oak, whatever. But I felt like I would say what I wanted to very pointedly in a like a blog article, but when I talked to people, I tried to reason with them and stuff. So like, what would I can't even remember my exact question that I started.
Yeah, what sort of benefits are there to
what
kind of engaging this way?
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you what are the 4 lessons, and what's the benefit of going through this approach?
Yeah, so the 4 lessons, the first one is surprise. So we'll call them your opponent, even though they're not. We try not to think of people as opponents, or one side versus the other side, but surprise your opponent. And the second one is to learn. The third is to engage. And then lastly, you win. And the benefits of learning this, one obvious one is to make and keep friends, even that think differently than you. Another one is that it helps me think when I do that. It helps me examine my own worldview, try to poke holes at it. And in my experience, this is not, it's extremely rare that I flip to the other side and say, oh, wow, I was totally wrong. You were totally right. And I'm on your side now on that issue. But what does happen a lot is that I find maybe a weakness, a weakness in the armor. And if you're, if you can get to the place where you're curious about that, where you want to find the weaknesses in your armor. I was not that way 15 years ago at all. I thought I had it, and when I would engage with people, I was not interested in seeing any points that they had right. But if you change your mindset a little bit, then you're able to strengthen it, and you can refine your worldview, refine your principles a little bit, and see the nuance. And that leads you to being able to engage better. That leads you to being more convincing. If you can find out how the other person ticks, how they think, besides at the surface, we often go to the lowest common, the lowest level, and we're totally in political mode. We're talking about, well, Trump this and Biden that. But if you can go deeper in, or I guess higher level, I don't know if that's down or up, but if you can find their goals and find how did they actually get there, how did they come to that conclusion, what experiences, maybe what media are they consuming, and once you find their path and how they got there, you can see a little bit more clearly, and you'll know precisely what sorts of things to try to look at together. And if your goal is to convince them otherwise, then you'll be a lot more effective that way.
I really liked in the story the way, both Jace and the Zero Supremacy guy, as they come together, they both, like you said, they both have some things to learn from each other, because they're totally, on opposite sides and knocking heads, and they don't really see what's the driving force behind what you are saying, and what's the driving force behind your story. It's really the experiences that we bring and the principles that we've sort of adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we handle those things? And so for me, I'm very agency driven, that I have a very strong personal freedom for everybody kind of mentality. And so somebody that conflicts with that says, well, I think, we should do it a completely opposite way through force, I naturally want to butt heads with them instead of, okay, where do we have common ground, and
Mm-hmm.
and where can we work together, or at least agree on something, so that we don't hate each other.
Yeah.
We're trying to at least say, I validate this point that you have. And I thought you did a great job of that in the book, of like, as they start to open up to each other, they start to like see, well, what if we did this? What if somebody put this together? And so, the project kind of comes
Mm-hmm.
about in the story. And that was just so cool to see that development, and really feel like, yeah, this isn't pie in the sky woo-woo stuff. This is legit, how to work with somebody, and then say, hey, let's do something productive that both of us can agree on.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you give an example of like dojo lesson 1?
Sure. Yeah. So the first lesson is surprise. And I can actually give you a little bit of a taste of how it works in the book. So I'm holding here a foam sword. I've given this presentation to some school groups before. So what we do is we give a sword to 2 students, and we have them stand across from each other, and we say, okay, we're going to say go, and you make your move in a way that surprises them the most. So they usually try to fake and then hurry and do something else that they can't block with the sword. They try to be quick. So have a little fun with that. And later, someone that knows has seen this before, or maybe somebody actually guesses it. The most surprising thing that you can do when you're set up to fight is to drop the sword. And it's not intuitive. And when, if we pull this back to when you're in an argument, and especially let's say you're online, there's people that are gonna go through the comments and see that the natural thing is to be in battle mode, and you're not going to let them get any points. You're just going to do the best you can. You know what they're going to say, And so you're thinking a couple steps ahead, and it's almost like a dance that's rehearsed. You know what they're going to say, and you know what you're going to say back. And the winner might be who thinks ahead the longest or can go the furthest. So what we want to do, we don't want to play that game. And you can be the first to decide not to play that game. You don't have to wait for them to drop their sword first. You can drop yours. And we want to sort of shock them into a different sort of engagement. And it takes a little time. If it's online or even in person, it might take a few interactions over days or weeks or whatever before the walls start coming down and before they trust that you're coming in good faith and want to have an actual meaningful discussion, that you're coming at them with curiosity. And a few of those options on how to do that are to admit you don't know something, just be upfront about it. Sometimes they'll throw something at you and just don't take the bait. Just you can admit if they have a good point, or if it's something that you don't have an answer for. You might say, well, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that before. I might need to look into that. I'm not sure if I agree. It doesn't sound quite right, but I'm willing to look into it. Yeah, so things like that. And Oak, you mentioned validating. That's huge. If you're having a sort of debate like that, and somebody says, actually, I really like that you care enough to want to do something about that. A statement like that can really take someone off balance, and they're not expecting that, and they're not sure what they're into anymore. And that's a really good thing, because we want them to kind of shift their stance and get ready for a new kind of engagement.
Yeah. So you brought up, meaningful discussions, and you have to be genuine about that. You can't literally fake that, like, let's have a meaningful discussion and not mean it. Otherwise, you really come across as somebody that's conceited, or I don't know the exact right word there, but fake. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you really have to drop the sword and say, okay, look, I want to be a good listener for a little bit. Tell me what you're actually feeling, and let me make sure I understand it. I'll reflect it back to you. Make sure. In fact, Jordan Peterson, I watched a short thing he did, like how to win any argument. And I was like, what's this? Mm-hmm. 4 minutes? How's he going to explain that in 4 minutes? And he basically said, drop the sword. He was expressing the idea that in any discussion, when somebody expresses themselves, you just agree in the discussion that we can't move on from what somebody says until the other person reflects back to them what the other person said in a way that you are happy with, that okay, you heard what I said. And as soon as you can get on that level, then you can actually have a conversation. But if I got in a conversation with you and you said something to me and I'm like, well, you said such and such, and you're like, yeah, but I don't think you really understand where I'm coming from. Say that again. And I'd be like, okay, so you're saying this, and I've got to say it in a way that you say, yeah, you get what I'm saying. And then I can say something.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a cool idea. And I've never seen that modeled, but that was kind of new to me to kind of think about. And I thought that's actually pretty smart, which Jordan Peterson is pretty smart. So
yeah, for sure.
That's not really surprising.
Yeah, we talk about that a little bit in the book, and we talk about the difference between straw man and steel man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it took me a while to learn that I could be curious. I could kind of open myself up. I could not pick all the battles that come at me, and it wasn't a loss. I wasn't defeated. I used to think that if I let down a little bit, if I don't come at it with absolutely everything, then they'll win and the country will be worse off, because that's one more person that that is still out there thinking the wrong things.
Right. Right. One of the things that I remember, this is probably a dozen years ago, actually more, probably 14, 15 years ago. I had a website project called Utah's Republic. And this was after I found out that Utah's history standards, kindergarten through 12th grade, the word republic didn't even appear in them. And it was after my early days was math battle oriented, because Utah's math standards were pretty bad. I'm not going to get into the whole history there, but during that Utah's Republic project, my website was attacked by people who used anonymous names, and it really taught me a lesson. And so I've always tried to use my name whenever I post anything. So if I'm going to say something, I'm going to put my name on it, so that I'm not ever tempted to say stuff that I shouldn't say, that I wouldn't put my name behind.
Yeah.
And because as soon as you go to, well, I'm just Anon, or I'm going by John Doe, it's like too many people take license with that and engage in saying things that are either hurtful or mocking, or in some way it's just you're inauthentic. It's not you. And that's the only way that people should communicate, is in an authentic kind of way. And there's plenty of people that are authentic that use their name that are hurtful, but I at least think when we're dealing with people online, I see that as like one of the big challenges. You go on Facebook and, like you said, it's like, oh, if I'll just toss this zinger out there, or lob this verbal grenade into the room and see what happens. And it's not helpful. It doesn't win anybody over. So the only way we can really win people over is by having a rational discussion where we can respect each other's viewpoints and say, well, have you considered this? Or, hey, I agree with what you just said here in this way. Maybe I don't agree with all of it, but I concede this. And so there just needs to be a better dialogue. And I think your book does a great job of helping to open that door. So what are you trying to do now with like you've put the framework together, you've put the book. Is there a book 2 in the works, a sequel, Jace Gets the Girl, or what?
I do get asked that quite a bit. Well, yeah, I guess I'll tell you some of my main goals with that. I wrote it for my own kids, ultimately. And I had, a few years ago, I started to have a little bit of a midlife crisis. My oldest was getting ready to graduate and leave the house. And I thought, if I taught them everything they need to know, there's a lot of topics out there. And I thought about things that they maybe didn't hear in school that I did in high school. And so I didn't think that I would need to teach them that. We didn't homeschool or anything. So I felt a little bit in the dark there. And also, like in college, what if there's some key facts or key ideas that they wouldn't get? So I thought I want to cover some of those, because there's some topics where if you understand a few things, some examples, like some things about American history, they're kind of left out of the narrative today, or some things about, let's say, oh, my mind's going blank, like the free market. You can take a lot of facts and kind of spin them, and if that's all you see, you're totally against capitalism or the free market. And so I thought, well, I want to make sure they get maybe the 5 greatest facts that could refute that. So if they have that in their heads already, even if they don't do anything with it right now, but later on in college or wherever, if they you're a professor that's leaning the other way, and um, maybe a leftist that's trying to convince them to another way of thinking, that will sort of trip something in their head. They'll say, wait a second, that doesn't make sense, because I remember learning this. And so that will trigger them to search out, to research, to ask questions, to maybe give me a call. Something that happens nowadays is we send our kids out into the world or to college, and a surprising number of them sort of flip ideologies. They flip completely, and that's sort of surprising, because we think, well, we thought we did a good job of teaching them, and we thought they'd at least talk it over with us before they changed their minds in such a drastic way. And I wanted to prevent that binary thinking of, well, if I hear a few things that don't seem to make sense with what I learned at home, I'm not thinking, well, I have to pick one or the other. It's sort of like the Little Mermaids in the movie, right? Or in the theaters. So King Triton told Little Mermaid, don't go up to the surface, humans are bad. And she had an experience where she thought, wait, they're not all bad, I don't think. So she flipped and said, they're good. So she kind of went after the humans, and she didn't know that there actually were some real dangers to be concerned about. There's some nuance there that she hadn't learned yet. So by learning these things and how to think and how to engage with others who think differently, that is how you navigate your own future. I'm going to be there for my kids as much as I can, but that's not realistic for me to be there in those key moments all the time. And so I wanted to empower them to be able to do that on their own as much as they could.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, way to go being a great dad that way, even to the extent of writing a book that your kids could learn some of those principles from. So that's awesome. How can people, number one, learn more about, well, I mean, they should get a copy of the book, but how can they stay in touch with you? Like, I know that you've had some interest in people like setting up bathwater brigades and stuff like that. And so what do you, I don't know if you want to reveal like anything you're working on presently, but how do people stay in touch with you? And if you want to talk about some of the things that you're looking at doing, feel free.
Sure. Yeah. So if you go to my website, bathwaterbrigade.com, scroll down a little, and there's a sign up form to get onto my email list. There are some things that are in the works, and I'll definitely let you know about what happens. Hopefully it will be more than just one thing. There'll be different ways to kind of further these concepts and principles, and try to try to educate mostly our kids. I have heard from a lot of adults that said it helps them engage with their own kids and helps them reason with them. So even if the kid doesn't read the book, they're able to sort of train them in good ways to think, and open up that channel to talk with their parents about about whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome. So bathwaterbrigade.com, and more to come. So that's fantastic. I just love the book, and thought you did just such a great job creating something entertaining and educational. And I know I learned a lot from it, and just, it's one of those things that you read and it makes you think, like, how do I interact like with my kids and with other people, and how can I do better? And so I think that's just something we all need to do, especially we're in such a societal mess right now, and we've talked a little about this before, but we've got different types of people in society, and there's those that we're just never going to convince. They're in it for power or money, and the only way to deal with that is to deal with our neighbors on like a rational level and say, do we agree with what's going on? Well, where can we find some solutions? And are we electing the right people? Who should we elect? What kind of people do we really want to put in charge? And it's it's not the person that's hungry for power, and it's not necessarily the person that thinks they're going to cure it all, but it's not necessarily the moderate either. Like, where do we find the balance to maintain our freedom that comes back to like core values that we as Americans share?
Mhm.
And so I just think that, this book is a way to help us engage a little better. Like you said, learn to have those conversations and help neighbors and families to have a better relationship so that they can have more difficult conversations without being at each other's throats.
Yeah, some of the most rewarding moments for me when I employ these principles, and I'm not perfect. Sometimes my wife reminds me, she says, I don't know if that was a bathwater thing to say right there. So, but some of the most rewarding, coolest experiences I have is when I've sort of built up a relationship with somebody that was completely on the other side, and we almost hated each other at first. And where, let's say online, we'll get discussing a topic, and their friends will get on and just dogpile and just do the vitriolic thing that you do, I guess, on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And then that person will say, "Hey, cool it. He's cool." Step in and defend me and say, he's not what you think. There's more going on here. And like you said, coming up with exploring some solutions with the common ground that you've sort of teased out over a period of time. You can say, I've got this idea, maybe something that you would normally do with just your side, and say, what if we changed the branding of this just a little bit, and what if we bring in you and your friends? This is something, I think this is an issue we agree on, and we'll leave the parts of it out that you don't agree with, and you can leave out your parts and just take the Venn diagram, just take that center and say, let's see if there's something there that we can do. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you, Jefferson. I've really enjoyed talking to you and having you, share some of the book and stuff. We'll hope that a lot of people check out your book and website, bathwaterbrigade.com, and look forward to seeing what you do next.
I'll let you know. Thank you.